Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome back Jessie Mahoney, pediatrician and coach. Today's Kevin MD article is Why Physician Wellness Programs Must Evolve Beyond Institutions. Jessie, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so tell us what this latest article is about.
So, this article is about the idea that we need to think beyond the wellness committee within the hospital or our institution's responsibility for wellness. And I say that as someone who led institutional wellness for a long time. And I think that that was a necessary first step. But I also think that we, at this point, have to evolve beyond that because what I see time and time again is that that can only get us so far. We're offering wellness within a system and within a structure that's causing many of the things that we're trying to get well from. And so, this idea that we can and should look beyond our institutions as part of the wellness solution. And I think what I've been seeing is institutions are leaning even more heavily into trying to solve the wellness problem, but once again, solving it from that medicalized framework and institutionalized framework.
What do institutional wellness programs typically look like?
They typically look like connection and collegiality. So events, lots of events where they'll bring in speakers, which is helpful, but they usually look like either in conference rooms still with no windows or plopped in during lunch, or even, some of the more evolved ones will offer, say, day retreats. I actually used to run these for my previous organization, and they were fabulous in that we were able to take people out of the hospital and take some of the advantages of being in a separate space, but you're also in a space with all of your colleagues. And so there is not quite as much psychological safety as if you're with people from across the country, or many wellness programs are done for departments who are struggling. So you are in a place with people from your department, and that clouds the wellness piece. I also think that a lot of the wellness programs are built on seeing us as all a team working for this organization, but the people who are most well tend to isolate and withdraw, and so they don't tend to join those. And so by only offering that, we're limiting ourselves. I think we try really hard with institutions, and it isn't that it's not helpful, it's just that it's literally not enough given the challenges. So there might be yoga, there might be mindfulness, there might be a lot of organizations will actually offer, trips or events or retreats in beautiful locations for people who've been there for a certain amount of time, for example. And yet they're still part of the corporation and the system, which makes it hard for people who have real deep moral injury, for example, to actually heal from that and figure out what's going to work for them. As institutions, we don't encourage individualized plans for those kinds of things. I think there's also this sense of that we are always being evaluated within our institutions to some degree, whether it's not necessarily a formal evaluation, but you're still surrounded by the people that you work with and the leaders in your organization. And in fact, it's important for leaders to partake in wellness. So therefore, they're going to be there too, which limits its ability to have impact.
So that's interesting. A lot of the institutional wellness programs, number one, they take place within the institution
Yeah.
themselves. You're with your colleagues within that institution, and sometimes that limits its effectiveness. So, what kind of changes do they need to make? I can't imagine a lot of institutions wanting to stray from that team mentality that we're all working for that institution that you talked about.
Right. Well, I think institutions can support outside wellness, and that has been happening through people using CME fundings to go outside to utilize programs that offer both wellness and CME. And wellness does improve patient care. If you're a not burnt out physician, it improves patient care, and therefore it can be eligible for CME. I think a lot of institutions are supporting it as professional development.
Mhm.
And so learning about communication and learning about I'll say self-care, which is not a word I love, but how to take care of yourself. If you learn mindfulness, you can share it with your patients, you can bring it back to your teams. And so I think offering, whether it's stipends or allowing people to use professional education funding in different creative ways can be an amazing way to do it. Some places will hire outside people and have wellness programs that are adjacent. So they're not within the organization, but they are available and they're confidential and they're held in a separate space or virtual
Mhm.
where hopefully there's no reporting back. Sometimes there's a one-way reporting where the organization wants to ask you to cover certain things, but that you don't share anything if that happens. And that creates a bit more of a separate space. I think that organizations have to continue to offer wellness
Mhm.
because if they don't, there's a message there. But it can't be the only thing that we offer. And I think the other piece of this is that when we in medicine look to our organizations to solve the problem, then we're never happy with how they solve it. And there's a bit of this, it's not my problem to solve, it's your problem to solve. And I think it's a dual situation that if we aren't healthy, we can't be part of the solution. And so this idea that our organization should do it creates a just a tension and a pressure dynamic that over the years has not been as helpful or effective as we would like.
Now, from the physician's standpoint, if they're concerned about wellness, should they take the initiative and look for programs outside of what the institution offers? Or should the institutions themselves encourage physicians to take some of these outside CMEs?
I think it's both, honestly, because I think that physicians can, should, want to, will benefit from doing it on their own. And I actually think that when I see people who take the initiative on their own, they actually often get more out of it than
Mhm.
when it's paid for by someone else because they've invested in themselves. And for us in healthcare, that's a big deal. We tend to not invest in ourselves beyond going to medical training. We think we should be able to do it on our own and we shouldn't need extra support. So I think there's tremendous value in doing it on your own. I also think that if physicians can encourage this as a valid thing to do and to note how it's helped people, then I think that gives those people who tend to hesitate more a willingness to approach it and an acceptance within the organization that lots of people do it.
So, when looking at these outside CMEs for wellness, what should
Yeah.
physicians look for in these programs to make sure that they're effective?
Yeah. Well, I think it's looking for programs that don't just speak to sort of the usual things, but really look at things that we know help, like physiology and teaching you how to be mindful, things that are happening in nature that your organization can't offer. So, looking for things that are different, not necessarily going into a big conference room and doing the same thing that your
Mhm.
organization does, but how can you put yourself in a separate space? Or how can you find something that's one-on-one or a very small group? I also think things that are tailored to you. So women physicians have partaken a lot of programs specific to women physicians. I think physician moms, that's a realm, or even groups of men. I think that we can find safety in different pockets of learning. That being said, I think there's also tremendous value in being in spaces with people who come from different organizational systems and some from private practice, some from VA, some from big HMOs, because I think then we have this normalization of what's the culture of medicine versus where you are. It gets you out of the victimhood of where you are and into sort of like, wow, we're all in this together. What can we do? But I see a lot of people signing up for things that look similar to what their organization is offering. So my thought is look for something that's different and look for something that's tailored to the things that you are specifically working on. And so if you are really working on, your relationships, or you're really working on leadership, or you're really working on boundaries, like look for things that offer those types of a focus, because that can also get you a lens of other people in healthcare in different specialties, different parts of the countries with different backgrounds, also working on the same thing. There's tremendous insight in that and a sense of belonging and a sense of not being alone that I don't see when people show up in their institution because there is just that cloud of not 100% psychological safety, not 100% not being evaluated. Because anytime you're with your direct colleagues who you work with every day, we like it or not, evaluate each other and judge each other all the time and try to figure out how we measure up. And so there is a very different level of access to wellness and healing that can come when you're not in the medical space.
And one of the things that you wrote in your article is that it's important that these external programs are designed by physicians for physicians, right?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times they're not designed by physicians, and it's very hard to understand the physician experience and address the real drivers of burnout and unwellness if you haven't lived in that world. And I think that we spend a lot of time then trying to explain the physician perspective, and we use that as something that kind of becomes a barrier to healing because they can't understand or they don't understand. And so I think that programs designed by physicians for physicians are ultimately more healing and can get right to the crux of it. You know, we're not very patient in medicine. We want to get to the crux of it and get to the healing. And physicians can do that for one another. I've seen a bit of backlash, like, well, they shouldn't be doing this, they should be doing something else. And my thought is we have to take care of each other. No one else is out there taking care of us. And that physician lens is a very different lens that you cannot bring unless you've practiced in healthcare. People don't even can't even comprehend what it's like from the outside.
Can you share a success story with us? Maybe one of your clients or someone that you know who looked beyond the institutional walls and found success and it made a difference by looking for a program outside of their institution.
Yeah, I see it all the time in small coaching groups where people find that support and recognize. Oftentimes, they recognize that where they are is part of the problem. Maybe it's not a fit for them, or they actually can start to see what's happening in their own space that's not them when they are in a group with people who are either in a similar specialty, but just in medicine elsewhere. There's this sense of belonging and safety that allows people to leave toxic jobs or allows people to actually decide that where they are works pretty well for them if they let go of certain stories. It's so much easier to see stories in people in different settings and to say, "Ooh, wait, this is just what I'm describing about this." So I see people all the time in these smaller settings find support and connections from across the country and across specialties that can be really work as like a buoy or a ballast in when they go back to their setting. And that's very different than doing it in your own setting. So especially for people who want to pivot or who might want to change or who need to get out of a difficult situation, I see it helpful all the time. It's sort of like a reset as to where I am in the situation. I think it also often makes it so clear if you're in an unhealthy situation,
Mhm.
the path outward.
We're talking to Jessie Mahoney, pediatrician and coach. Today's Kevin MD article is Why Physician Wellness Programs Must Evolve Beyond Institutions. Jessie, as always, will end with take home messages they want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
The message today is I think it's an and. So it isn't that institutional wellness is not effective. It's just that it's not enough. And that when we expect it all to happen there, we miss out on tremendous opportunities for healing and growth and changing the culture of medicine. And so if we are willing to look beyond that and willing to jump into it, and if institutions could ultimately be willing to support it and encourage it, as a solution, I think that we will actually be able to grow and heal to a much greater degree than we have been so far.
Jessie, as always, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. Thanks again for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.